World leaders have welcomed the newly announced US, Qatar, and Egypt co-brokered Gaza ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel. The European Union is considering lifting sanctions on Syria in multiple fields, according to a non-paper seen by Euronews.
Multiple people have been injured after Russia launched a massive overnight attack across Ukraine.
NATO defense ministers are in Brussels discussing the latest security situation. Secretary General Mark Rutte says Europe must shift to a wartime mindset.
A ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas has been announced. The deal brokered by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt will offer much-needed respite for the people of Gaza who've been enduring 15 months of war. World leaders have welcomed this development with open arms.
Well, we've had many difficult days since Hamas began its terrible war. We've encountered roadblocks and setbacks. We've not given up. And now, after more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who's recently announced his resignation after weeks of domestic turmoil, also weighed in on the matter.
Canada stands ready to do whatever it can to ensure the success of this agreement. But more than that, this ceasefire gives us hope. Hope that we can now focus our attention on a true, lasting political solution to this conflict.
The United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary David Lammy says the deal is an opportunity for both sides to begin the healing process, and for this 15-month nightmare to end.
I welcome, particularly for those hostage families, that this deal has finally been broken, and for the agony and horrors of war and the Palestinian people in Gaza. Finally, this horror has come to an end.
And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who's been an instrumental player in the war, also expressed his relief following the announcement of the agreement. He thanked the mediators for their efforts in securing the deal, but stressed that now attention must turn towards achieving a permanent peace.
Ending the occupation and achieving a negotiated two-state solution with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security, in line with international law, relevant UN resolutions and previous agreements, remain an urgent priority. Only through a viable two-state solution can the aspirations of both peoples be fulfilled.
The deal is set to begin on Sunday, January 19th. It will be implemented in 3 stages, which will feature the release of dozens of hostages held in Gaza, the release of 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israel, and weeks of peace. The European Union is laying preliminary ground to a wide-range lifting of sanctions on Syria, according to a non-paper seen by Euronews. The bloc is considering lifting sanctions on transportation, exports of oil and gas, and financial and banking activities. The informal EU document says that any possible change to terrorist designations of al-Qaeda-affiliated groups, like Syria's ruling Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, must be implemented at the UN Security Council level before the bloc adopts it. The paper says that delisting terror groups will have to be conditions-based as to prevent any risk of financing terrorism. The non-paper was produced by the EU Council for negotiations and is expected to be substantively discussed during a meeting of EU foreign ministers on January 27th. The document states that the country's ousted president, Bashar al-Assad, and affiliates cannot benefit from the lifting and will still be subjected to sanctions. Workers participating in a 3-hour general strike called by opponents of the incumbent Georgian Dream Party were attacked in the streets of Tbilisi. Footage circulating on social media showed baton-wielding individuals assaulting strikers. Local media says the individuals were titushkis, a term used to describe hired thugs, usually in service of government or political groups. Demonstrators chanted, blew whistles, and waved Georgian and EU flags side by side. A report suggests that more than 350 businesses participated in the strike. Organizers say the demonstration was intended to serve as a warning of what the country would face in isolation from Europe.
8 people, including 2 children, were injured in a Russian strike on a multi-story residential building in Ukraine's Donetsk region on Wednesday morning. The strike was part of a massive overnight attack on Ukraine that targeted several regions, forcing the country to introduce preventive power cuts, according to the energy minister.
Сильный гул, не знаю, как это назвать, все тряслось. Здесь стекла не вылетели, только внизу там, то есть нас стекла не зацепили, слава богу. В детской комнате, конечно, все вылетело. Так же само в зале и в кухне.
One man was killed in Kharkiv and several people were also injured in Kherson. Moscow launched more than 40 missiles and 70 drones, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said. The attack comes a day after Ukraine launched what its military called its most massive attack on Russian military facilities. Ukrainian forces reportedly struck as deep as 1,100 kilometers inside Russia. Russia's Ministry of Defense vowed to retaliate, accusing Ukraine of firing multiple Western-made missiles. Wednesday's attack has further exacerbated the strain on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which Russian forces have persistently attacked during the almost 3-year war.
Defense ministers from over 20 NATO members are meeting in Brussels to discuss security and upcoming challenges to the alliance. NATO's chief Mark Rutte opened the 2-day session with a clear goal: shifting to a wartime mindset.
To prevent war, we need to prepare for it. It's time to shift to a wartime mindset. And this means we need to make our defenses even stronger by spending more on defense, producing more and better defense capabilities. Russia is hard at work to try to weaken our democracies and chip away at our freedom. And it is not alone. It has China, North Korea and Iran by its side.
Rutte warned the alliance members that Europe's future is at stake, and NATO must do all it can to keep the people safe amidst growing security threats to the region. The next summit in 6 months' time will take place in The Hague.
Poland, who has taken over the EU Council presidency, has named security as one of its key priorities. But for Warsaw, security has many faces. In an interview with Euronews, the Minister for European Affairs, Adam Szłapka, explained that one aspect of security is Europe being independent from Russia in terms of energy.
Naszym celem powinno być kompletne odcięcie się od dostaw paliw kopalnych z Rosji i dostaw surowców. Z 2 powodów. Po pierwsze, żebyśmy my byli bezpieczniejsi, a po drugie dlatego, że nie możemy finansować reżimu, który dopuszcza się takich okrucieństw.
Europe has managed to overall reduce its energy dependence from Russia. Some countries, such as Hungary, Slovakia, or Austria, have been less enthusiastic. These nations could pose a challenge for Warsaw. When it comes to security, Warsaw has also said it's willing to participate in EU cooperation programs, including the joint purchase of ammunition and cooperating in strengthening critical infrastructure.
Polska ma tu zdanie jednoznaczne. Wszelkie inicjatywy wspólne, unijne muszą być komplementarne i muszą współpracować w tym zakresie z NATO. NATO jest podstawą naszego bezpieczeństwa.
For EU High Representative Kaja Kallas, NATO and the EU complement each other when it comes to ensuring Europe's security.
We have complementary roles. I mean, NATO is dealing with the military issues, the military planning for defense. But Europe, we deal with the European defense industry. We deal with European defense as whole, because we also have countries that are not in NATO.
Elaborate again, you didn't rule out military coercion.
Kallas added that Europe's security challenges have only become more complicated and now involve hybrid threats against energy and food security, as well as cyber attacks.
The presidential race has officially begun in Poland, with the first round taking place on May 18th. 11 candidates have announced their run for the office. The Polish governing coalition relies heavily on the results of this election. The current president, Andrzej Duda, comes from the right-wing opposition Law and Justice Party and has the power to veto pieces of legislation proposed in parliament. The main issues of the campaign so far include abortion rights, civil partnerships, the rule of law, and security, the last of which is especially relevant in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine. According to the latest polls, Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski is the current favorite to win. His greatest competitor is Karol Nawrocki, a candidate running in name as an independent, but who's endorsed by the Law and Justice Party and who currently heads the Polish Institute of National Remembrance. Polling in third place is Sławomir Mencen from the right-wing Konfederacja Party, but the race is expected to be a close competition between the two favorites. Trzaskowski's party, the Civic Coalition, is described as a centrist pro-European, whereas Nawrocki's Law and Justice Party is described as more skeptical of the European Union. In the last presidential elections, which took place in 2020, Trzaskowski narrowly lost to incumbent Andrzej Duda, who is no longer eligible to run due to term limits. That year, over 10 million Poles voted for each of the two candidates. Only Lech Wałęsa, the first president of Poland to be elected after the fall of communism, received a higher number of votes. If a majority of Poles do not vote for any of the candidates in the first round, a second round between the top two candidates will take place on the 1st of June.